I never thought I'd say these words out loud. Card declined. The sound of them echoed in my ears as I stood frozen in that upscale restaurant, surrounded by Chicago's elite, my husband's smirk burning into my skin. 7 years of building a life together, and it had come to this. A calculated public humiliation designed to force me into submission. What he didn't know was that I'd been watching, waiting, and preparing. By the end of that night, it wouldn't be just my credit card that was canceled, but his entire plan to control me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rebecca Taylor. At 35, I'd built the kind of career most people in marketing could only dream about. As the director of digital campaigns at Horizon Media, I'd helped transform struggling brands into household names. My work had won industry awards, been featured in case studies, and earned me respect in a competitive field. That was the professional side of my life, the part that flowed smoothly, predictably, like a well-executed strategy. My personal life was a different story. That evening began like many others in recent months, with tension simmering just below the surface of polite conversation. Michael had texted that morning, insisting I meet him for dinner with his boss Tom Richards and Tom's wife Jessica at Emerson's, one of those Chicago steakhouses where the waiters know more about the origin of the beef than most people know about their own ancestry. The kind of place where business deals are made over $200 bottles of wine and where appearances matter more than substance. Wear something appropriate, Michael had added in a follow-up text. Jessica always looks impeccable. I'd chosen a navy blue dress that walked the line between professional and elegant, paired with the pearl earrings Michael had given me for our 5th anniversary, back when gifts were expressions of love rather than reminders of expectations. As I applied my makeup that evening, I caught myself wondering when exactly my husband had stopped seeing me as a partner and started viewing me as an accessory to his ambition. Was it when he'd been promoted to vice president at Stratton Financial? 6 months ago? When Tom had invited us to his lake house and Michael had noticed the way the other executives' wives seamlessly managed social obligations while their husbands discussed business? Or had the seeds been planted years earlier, waiting for the right conditions to grow? The restaurant was exactly as I remembered it. Rich mahogany paneling, crisp white tablecloths, and the soft glow of crystal chandeliers reflecting off polished silverware. Michael was already seated with Tom and Jessica when I arrived, apologizing for my lateness. A client call had run over, the kind of situation that used to earn understanding from my husband, but now triggered barely concealed irritation. "Rebecca, finally," Michael said, standing to kiss my cheek. His cologne, stronger than he usually wore it, mingled with something else I couldn't quite place. "We were just discussing the Miami conference next week." "The one with your secretary?" I said lightly, settling into my chair. "Amber, right? She must be excited for her first business trip." Something flickered across Michael's face. Surprise, perhaps, that I'd mentioned Amber so directly. Tom cleared his throat uncomfortably while Jessica watched our exchange with the sharp interest of someone who collected gossip like others collected art. "Administrative assistant," Michael corrected smoothly. "And yes, she's been invaluable in planning the logistics. The Henderson account is too important to leave anything to chance." Jessica leaned forward, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. "Michael tells us you've been tremendously busy with your own work, Rebecca. It must be difficult balancing such a demanding career with everything else." Her gaze flicked meaningfully around the restaurant where other couples, clearly part of the same social ecosystem, were engaged in the delicate dance of business-social interaction. What she meant but didn't say was, with being a proper corporate wife. With the dinner parties and charity committees and carefully cultivated relationships that helped men like Michael and Tom climb higher. The unspoken second economy of corporate success that operated through wives like Jessica. It's all about priorities, I replied, accepting the menu from the waiter. Thankfully, Michael has always understood that my career is as important as his. Had I imagined the slight tightening around my husband's mouth? The subtle exchange of glances between him and Tom? The waiter returned to take our drink orders. Tom requested a bottle of Cabernet, the 2010 Napa Reserve, without consulting the rest of us. Michael nodded approvingly. "And to start?" the waiter inquired after describing the evening's specials with practiced precision. Tom ordered the bone marrow for the table. Jessica selected a salad with the dressing on the side. Michael chose the tuna tartare. When my turn came, I requested the scallops. "Excellent choice," the waiter affirmed, collecting our menus. "The scallops here are magnificent," Jessica commented, "though I can never indulge. Too rich for my diet." She patted her slim waist, though the gesture was less about self-deprecation and more about drawing attention to her disciplined figure. The conversation drifted to safe topics: the unpredictable Chicago weather, the disappointing performance of the Bears, the newest exhibit at the Art Institute. Beneath these socially acceptable exchanges, I felt a current of tension. Michael kept checking his phone. Tom seemed distracted, and Jessica watched me with an attention that felt predatory rather than friendly. When our appetizers arrived, Michael steered the conversation toward the upcoming Miami conference. "The Henderson portfolio could double our department's value," he explained to Tom. "I've been preparing for this presentation for months." "With Amber's help," Jessica added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Michael says she's been working late almost every night." She turned to me. "It must be wonderful having a husband so dedicated to his career, Rebecca." The implication wasn't subtle. I'd heard the rumors, of course. The lingering meetings, the weekend emergency work sessions, the texts that made Michael smile in a way he hadn't smiled at me in months. But hearing Jessica almost acknowledge it openly, in front of me, in public, made something shift inside my chest. "Yes," I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "Michael's always been very focused on getting what he wants." The waiter cleared our appetizer plates and brought the main courses. Tom had ordered the porterhouse, Jessica the sea bass, Michael the ribeye. My salmon arrived last, perfectly plated with spring vegetables. "A toast," Tom proposed, raising his wine glass, "to the Henderson deal and to Stratton Financial's continued growth." We clinked glasses, and I noted how Michael's hand brushed against mine, a gesture that would have seemed affectionate to outside observers, but felt performative, as if he were checking an item off a list. Touch wife, appear connected, maintain, image. The conversation turned to the company's expansion plans. As they discussed markets and projections, I noticed how Tom included me in his explanations despite my working for a different company, while Michael spoke as if I weren't there. It was a subtle distinction, but a telling one. "Speaking of expansion," Jessica said during a lull, "when are you two planning to start a family? You've been married, 7 years now?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Michael and I had discussed children early in our marriage, agreeing to focus on our careers first. But recently, he'd begun dropping hints about timing and biological clocks and the right kind of environment for raising kids, by which he meant one with a stay-at-home mother. "We're focusing on our careers at the moment," I answered, cutting a piece of salmon with more force than necessary. "Though priorities can change," Michael added, his tone casual but his meaning clear. "Indeed they can," I agreed. "For instance, I'm being considered for the executive creative director position at Horizon. If I get it, my salary would increase by about 40%. I smiled at Tom. I'd actually be earning more than Michael. The table went quiet. Tom raised his eyebrows slightly. Jessica's mouth formed a perfect O of surprise. And Michael? Michael's expression hardened into something I barely recognized. More wine? Tom offered, breaking the tension. As the meal progressed, I felt a strange detachment settling over me, as if I were observing the scene from a distance. Here we were, 4 successful adults, playing roles in a drama whose script had been written decades ago. The ambitious executives, the supportive wives, the careful maintenance of an ecosystem where men's careers took precedence and women's existed only to the extent they didn't interfere. I'd refused to follow that script, and now I was paying the price. The subtle undermining. The not-so-subtle pressure. The increasing control over areas of our life that had once been shared, like our finances. When the dessert menus arrived, I excused myself to use the restroom. In the elegant powder room with its fresh orchids and plush hand towels, I checked my banking app, a habit I'd developed recently as Michael's behavior had grown more concerning. That's when I saw it. The joint credit card account showed a 0 balance. Not low funds, completely empty. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked through to our shared checking account. The balance that had been over $15,000 yesterday now read $212.37. I checked our savings account, the one we'd built together for 7 years, the one that had held our dream of eventually buying a lakefront property. Empty. With trembling fingers, I tried to access our investment portfolio, but my credentials were rejected. User access revoked, the screen informed me coolly. I stood frozen, staring at my reflection in the ornate mirror. The woman looking back at me appeared composed. Blush still perfectly applied, lipstick unsmudged, eyes clear. But inside, a storm was gathering. This wasn't just about control anymore. This was about erasure. Financial erasure that preceded emotional erasure that preceded the complete dismantling of the life I'd built. I thought of Diane Wheeler, Michael's former colleague whose husband had systematically isolated her financially before their divorce, leaving her struggling to afford a lawyer to fight for her fair share. I remembered Michael's dismissive comments about her. She should have been more careful, and the chill I'd felt hearing him speak about a woman's financial vulnerability with such disregard. I'd been careful. I'd been more careful than Michael knew. Taking a deep breath, I returned to the table where dessert had already been ordered. Chocolate souffle for the men, berries for Jessica, and apparently nothing for me. I took the liberty of asking for the check, Michael informed me as I sat down. Early start tomorrow. As if on cue, the waiter approached with the leather portfolio containing the bill. Michael reached for it with the confident gesture of a man accustomed to picking up tabs, a man demonstrating his generosity and success to his boss. "Allow me," he said to Tom, who made the obligatory protest before acquiescing. I watched as Michael removed his platinum credit card from his wallet and handed it to the waiter without looking at the total. A power move, one of many I'd observed since his promotion. The waiter disappeared with the card, and the conversation continued, though I was barely listening now, my mind racing with calculations and realizations. Minutes later, the waiter returned with an uncomfortable expression. He leaned down to speak quietly to Michael, but in the momentary lull in conversation, his words carried clearly. "I'm sorry, sir, but your card has been declined." Michael's confidence faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "That's impossible. Try it again." The waiter nodded apologetically. "We did, sir. Twice." Jessica's eyebrows rose as she exchanged a look with Tom. This wasn't just a technical glitch. In their world, it was a social faux pas of the highest order, a crack in the carefully constructed facade of success. "Use this one," Michael said with forced casualness, producing another card from his wallet. His eyes didn't meet mine, but I could see the muscle in his jaw twitching, a tell he'd had since the early days of our relationship, a sign of suppressed anger. The waiter took the second card and departed. The conversation resumed, though more subdued now, weighted by the awkwardness of the moment. When the waiter returned again with the same apologetic expression, I knew before he spoke that the second card had also been declined. "I'm terribly sorry, sir." Michael's face flushed with a combination of embarrassment and rage. He reached for his phone, presumably to check his accounts, and I saw the exact moment when realization dawned. His eyes snapped to mine, a question in them, and then an accusation. Tom cleared his throat. "Allow me," he offered, already reaching for his wallet. "These things happen." "No," I said, surprising everyone, including myself, with the steadiness of my voice. "Let me take care of it." I opened my purse and removed a sleek black credit card, one Michael had never seen before because it was connected to an account he didn't know existed. An account I'd opened 3 years earlier after watching What Happened to Diane. An account where I'd been depositing a portion of each paycheck, building a safety net one deposit at a time. Michael stared at the card in my hand as if it were a weapon. "Rebecca," he began, his voice low with warning. "What is this?" "This," I replied, handing the card to the waiter, "is what happens when you marry someone smarter than you give them credit for." The waiter, sensing the tension, quickly disappeared with my card. Jessica leaned forward, no longer bothering to hide her interest. Tom suddenly became very interested in the last of his wine. "Maybe we should discuss this at home," Michael suggested, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. "You chose to empty our accounts before coming to dinner. You chose this audience. You wanted to teach me a lesson in front of your boss and his wife, that, without access to our money, I'd be helpless, dependent, forced to accept whatever terms you set." I smiled. "So, let's continue the lesson." The waiter returned with my card and the receipt. I signed it, adding a generous tip, and handed it back with a quiet, "Thank you." "Rebecca," Michael tried again, "you're blowing this out of proportion. There's been a misunderstanding with the accounts." "A misunderstanding that resulted in the transfer of our entire savings the day before your trip to Miami? A misunderstanding that coincidentally occurred after I declined to consider quitting my job? A misunderstanding that happened right when I mentioned being up for a promotion that would make me the higher earner?" "It's not what you think," he insisted, but his eyes darted to Tom, clearly concerned about how this was playing out in front of his boss. "Actually," I continued, reaching for my phone, "it's exactly what I think. But it goes beyond simple financial control, doesn't it? It's about the Miami property, too." Michael went still. "What Miami property?" I pulled up an email on my phone and placed it on the table where all could see. "The condo you purchased last month. The one in Amber's old neighborhood, just 2 blocks from where she grew up. The one you used our joint savings to make a down payment on 3 weeks ago." Tom's eyebrows shot up. Jessica's mouth formed that perfect O again, though this time it wasn't feigned surprise but genuine shock. "How did you—" Michael began, then stopped himself. "How did I know? Did you forget that I'm the one who handles our taxes? That I have copies of all our financial records? That my name is still on the property records you tried to bury under your company's LLC?" I shook my head. "The real question is, how did you think I wouldn't find out?" "These are private matters," Michael hissed, glancing at Tom and Jessica. "So is the Henderson account," I replied calmly. "But you've been discussing that freely." Tom cleared his throat. "Perhaps Jessica and I should—" "Stay," I interrupted. "Please. Since my husband chose to make our personal finances a public matter by arranging this little demonstration, you might as well hear the whole story." I turned back to Michael. "When exactly were you planning to tell me about using our savings to buy a property? Before or after your week in Miami with Amber?" Michael's face had gone from flushed to ashen. "It's a company investment property. With 1 bedroom and a view of the ocean? How convenient for business meetings." I turned to Tom. Did you know about this property acquisition, since it's supposedly for company use? Tom's discomfort was answer enough. This wasn't a company-sanctioned purchase. This was Michael acting on his own, using our joint funds for a personal venture, one that increasingly seemed designed to facilitate his relationship with his young assistant. Rebecca. Michael's voice had taken on a pleading quality now. We can discuss this at home. I can explain everything. Like you can explain the text messages, the late nights, the sudden business trips that never seemed to include video calls home. I felt a strange calm descending over me, the kind that comes with absolute clarity. Or perhaps you can explain why you thought financially stranding your wife before a business trip was an acceptable strategy? Jessica was watching the exchange with undisguised fascination. Tom looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. And Michael's expression had morphed from anger to calculation. I could almost see him reassessing, trying to determine how much I knew and how best to minimize the damage. I think you've misinterpreted a number of things, he said carefully. The account transfers were for investment purposes. The property is a company asset, and Amber is simply doing her job. Her job, I repeated, which apparently includes weekend meetings at your office when the building is empty, and daily lunch deliveries for 2 to your private office, and booking a single hotel suite in Miami, even though company policy mandates separate accommodations for male and female employees traveling together. Tom's head snapped toward Michael. This was clearly information he hadn't been aware of, and from his expression, it violated company protocols he took seriously. How did you, Michael began again, know these things? I finished for him. I didn't. Not until just now, but your reaction confirms what I suspected. I turned to Tom. I apologize for bringing this up during dinner, but as you can see, my husband left me with limited options when he emptied our accounts without warning. Tom nodded slowly, his earlier discomfort now replaced with something that looked like reassessment, both of Michael and of me. I returned my attention to my husband. Here's what happens next. By midnight tonight, you will transfer the funds back into our joint accounts, all of them. You will provide me with full documentation of the Miami property purchase, including the source of all funds used. And you will cancel the reservation for the suite and book separate rooms, as per company policy. And if I don't? Michael asked, his voice low. I met his gaze steadily. Then tomorrow morning, I forward the financial records I've already gathered to HR, to our families, and to our attorney. The records that show you using joint marital assets to purchase property without my knowledge or consent, a property conveniently located near your assistant's hometown, which you've arranged to visit together. The implication was clear, and from Tom's expression, the professional consequences would be significant. You wouldn't, Michael said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Wouldn't I? The Michael I married would have known better than to underestimate me. But you're not that man anymore, are you? I stood up, smoothing my dress with steady hands. Midnight, Michael. And I suggest you make other sleeping arrangements for tonight. I'll have my assistant send over some essentials from the house. Tom and Jessica watched in stunned silence as I gathered my purse. I turned to them with a polite smile. I apologize for the disruption to your evening. The chocolate soufflé here is truly excellent. I recommend savoring every bite. With that, I walked away from the table, feeling 3 pairs of eyes on my back as I moved through the restaurant with my head held high. For the first time in months, the weight that had been pressing on my chest, the suspicions, the uncertainty, the growing sense of isolation, began to lift. Outside, the Chicago night was cool and clear, the skyline glittering against the darkness like a promise. I took a deep breath of air that tasted like freedom and possibility. Whatever happened next, whether Michael met my terms or not, I had taken back control of my story. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. My sister Kate. I'd texted her briefly, from the restroom, letting her know I was implementing Protocol Diane, our code for the contingency plan we'd developed together after watching our friend's financial devastation. "It's done," I told her when I answered. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. I considered the question as I hailed a taxi. Was I okay? My marriage was likely over. My husband had betrayed me in multiple ways. The life I'd thought we were building had been revealed as a carefully constructed illusion. And yet... "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. "I think I am." Because while one chapter was ending, another was beginning. One where I reclaimed not just my financial security, but my sense of self. A self that didn't need Michael's approval or anyone else's to be complete. The taxi pulled up to the curb. As I gave the driver my sister's address, I noticed a message appearing on my phone. A notification from my bank of an incoming transfer. The first installment of funds being returned. I smiled. Michael had always been quick to calculate odds and cut losses when necessary. He'd realized I wasn't bluffing. This battle, at least, was won. But the war for my future, my truly independent future, was just beginning. And this time, I was fully armed for the fight. Kate's condo was a welcome sanctuary from the emotional storm I'd just weathered. Unlike my and Michael's meticulously designed home in Lincoln Park, a showcase meant to impress his colleagues and clients, her place in Wicker Park was all comfort and personality. Mismatched furniture collected from vintage stores, walls covered with local art, books stacked on every surface. The kind of home that invited you to kick off your shoes and curl up with a glass of wine, which is exactly what we did. "I still can't believe he emptied your accounts," Kate said, refilling my glass with a rich Cabernet that tasted infinitely better than the overpriced bottle Tom had ordered. Though actually, I can believe it. Michael's always had control issues. I raised an eyebrow. "Have I been that blind?" "Not blind," she said kindly. "Just invested. You wanted to see the best in him. We all did at first." She tucked her feet under her on the sofa. "Remember when he criticized my apartment the first time he visited? Said it had potential, but needed a more cohesive aesthetic?" I winced. "I do. I thought he was trying to be helpful." "He was trying to establish dominance," Kate corrected. "Same thing when he kept fixing your presentations in the early days, even though you were the marketing expert, not him. Or when he insisted on driving everywhere, even when he didn't know the route as well as you did." Put like that, a pattern emerged that I hadn't wanted to see. Small things, easily dismissed individually, but collectively telling a story of a man who needed to be in charge, who viewed partnership as something closer to ownership. "I kept thinking he'd change back," I admitted. "That the man who supported my career when we first met was still in there somewhere." Kate's expression softened. "The man you fell in love with showed you who he wanted you to think he was. This," she gestured vaguely, encompassing, "the night's events, is who he actually is when he doesn't get his way." My phone buzzed again. Another bank notification, a second transfer, larger this time. I showed Kate the screen. "He's cutting his losses," she nodded. "Smart move. He knows you have him cornered." "For now," I cautioned. "Michael doesn't stay cornered for long. He regroups and comes back with a different strategy." I took a long sip of wine. "This is just the beginning." Kate studied my face. "You're different tonight. Calmer than I expected." "I think I've been preparing for this longer than I realized," I replied. "Part of me has known for months that something fundamental had changed in our marriage. I just didn't want to admit it." My phone rang, Michael's name lighting up the screen. I showed it to Kate. "Are you going to answer?" she asked. I considered for a moment, then declined the call. "Not tonight. He needs to sit with the consequences of his actions for a while." Almost immediately, a text appeared. "We need to talk. This isn't what you think. Let me explain." Followed by another. "I'm transferring everything back. There was a misunderstanding with the accounts. The Miami property is an investment opportunity I was planning to surprise you with. And finally, please come home so we can discuss this like adults." Like adults. As if I were the one who had behaved childishly by calling out his attempts at financial control. "He's in damage control mode," Kate observed, reading over my shoulder. "Classic gaslighting. First deny, then minimize, then reframe." I turned off my phone. Whatever Michael had to say could wait until morning. Tonight was for regrouping, for processing, for planning my next steps. "You can stay as long as you need," Kate offered, as if reading my thoughts. "The guest room is ready." "Thanks. I might need a few days, just until I figure out my next move." I leaned back against the sofa cushions, suddenly exhausted. I can't go back to that house, not right away. It doesn't feel like mine anymore. "It never really was," Kate said softly. "It was always his vision, his statement piece. Just like the car, the vacations, the country club membership." She was right. Our Lincoln Park townhouse, with its designer furniture and strategic lack of personal photographs or mementos, too cluttered for Michael's taste, had always been more showroom than home. A place designed for entertaining clients and impressing colleagues, not for actually living. How had I not seen it? How had I allowed myself to be slowly erased from my own life? "The property in Miami," Kate began cautiously. "Do you think that he's been planning to leave me?" I finished for her. "Maybe. Or maybe it was just meant to be his private getaway with Amber, a place I wouldn't know about, wouldn't have access to." The thought was both painful and clarifying. While I'd been trying to save our marriage, Michael had been actively creating a life separate from me. A life with secret properties and hidden funds, and a younger woman who apparently didn't mind being the other woman. "What are you going to do?" Kate asked. I stared into my wine, considering. "First, I need to secure my financial position completely. The transfers tonight are a start, but I need to document everything. Every transaction, every purchase, every attempt to hide assets. And then? Then I meet with a divorce attorney." The words felt strange in my mouth, foreign yet necessary. Not our family attorney, someone completely separate, someone who specializes in high-net-worth divorces with complicated financial situations. Kate nodded approvingly. "I have a colleague who went through something similar last year. Her attorney was a shark, in the best possible way. I'll get you her contact information tomorrow." "Good. I'll need all the help I can get." I took another sip of wine. After that, I don't know. Everything feels so uncertain right now. "Except your career," Kate pointed out. "You said you're up for executive creative director?" I nodded. "The announcement is supposed to be next week, assuming this mess doesn't somehow impact it." "It won't," Kate said firmly. "Your work speaks for itself. And if anything, showing that you can handle a personal crisis with this much composure will only confirm your leadership material." I hoped she was right. My career had always been my anchor, the place where I felt most competent and valued. If I lost my marriage and my home, at least I would still have that. "I should get some sleep," I said, setting down my empty glass. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Kate squeezed my shoulder as she stood. "You're going to be okay, Becca. Better than okay. You're going to come out of this stronger than ever." As I settled into Kate's guest room, surrounded by the comforting clutter of books and art that Michael would have disdained, I found myself thinking not of what I had lost, but of what I might gain. Authenticity, independence, the freedom to define success on my own terms. My phone, which I'd turned back on to set an alarm, buzzed with new messages. More from Michael, increasingly desperate in tone, and one from an unexpected source. Tom Richards. Rebecca, I apologize for the awkward dinner situation. I'd like to speak with you privately when you have a moment. There are some matters concerning Stratton Financial that I believe would be in your interest to discuss. Interesting. I set the phone aside without responding. Whatever Tom wanted to talk about could wait. Tonight was for rest, for regathering my strength for the battles ahead. As I drifted toward sleep, I found myself thinking of the moment in the restaurant when I'd pulled out my secret card. The look on Michael's face. Shock giving way to anger, giving way to the dawning realization that he had severely miscalculated. That the woman he thought he could control had been several steps ahead of him all along. It wasn't vindication I felt exactly. It was something more powerful. The quiet certainty that I was capable of navigating whatever came next. Morning. Arrived with brutal clarity, sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the distant sounds of Kate moving around her kitchen. For a moment, I lay still, trying to orient myself to this new reality. Then I reached for my phone, preparing to face the aftermath of last night's confrontation. 17 missed calls from Michael, 32 text messages, increasingly frantic, in tone, and a series of notifications from my banking app, documenting the return of our joint funds, all of them, down to the last cent. I scrolled through Michael's texts, noting the progression from anger to bargaining to what seemed like genuine panic. 11:47 p.m., all funds transferred back. Can we please talk now? 12:15 a.m., I'm at the Four Seasons, room 1522. Please call me. 1:34 a.m., Rebecca, this has gone too far. I can explain everything if you just answer your phone. 2:46 a.m., the Miami property was going to be a surprise. For our anniversary. I wanted to tell you at dinner tonight, but then everything went sideways. 3:22 a.m., Tom just called me. He wants to discuss the situation first thing tomorrow. My career is on the line here. Please call me back. 5:08 a.m. I've canceled the Miami trip. I told Amber she needs to find another position. I'm doing everything you asked. What more do you want from me? 6:15 a.m. I love you. I'm sorry. Please come home. The last message, sent just 20 minutes ago, was different in tone. 7:42 a.m. If this is about teaching me a lesson, mission accomplished. But now you're putting everything we've built at risk. My meeting with Tom is at 9. I need to know where we stand before then. Where we stood? I wasn't entirely sure myself. But I knew it wasn't where we had been 24 hours ago, and it wasn't where Michael seemed to think we could return to with enough apologies and promises. I typed a brief response. All funds received. Thank you for complying. I'll be by the house at noon to pick up some things. We can talk then. His reply was immediate. I'll cancel my meetings and be there waiting. I didn't respond to that. Let him wonder. Let him wait. Let him experience just a fraction of the uncertainty I'd been living with for months. Kate had coffee waiting when I emerged from the guest room. You look better than you have a right to, she observed, sliding a mug toward me. Sleep well? Surprisingly, yes. I accepted the coffee gratefully. Maybe there's something restful about finally facing the truth, however ugly it is. Or maybe you've been carrying this weight for so long that setting it down, even under these circumstances, feels like relief, Kate suggested. That resonated. The constant vigilance, the growing suspicions, the effort of maintaining a facade of marital harmony while privately monitoring accounts and gathering evidence. It had been exhausting. Now, at least, everything was in the open. Michael's been blowing up my phone, I told her, settling at her kitchen counter. Apparently, Tom wants to meet with him this morning. He's panicking about his job. Kate's eyebrow rose. Good. He should be worried. Using company resources to facilitate an affair with his assistant? That's the kind of thing that ends careers. I don't actually want to destroy his career, I admitted, surprising myself with the truth of it. I just want what's fair, what's mine, and maybe for him to understand the consequences of his actions. Noble of you, Kate said, though her tone suggested she'd have preferred a more scorched earth approach. So what's your plan for today? I pulled up the contact information she'd sent for the divorce attorney, Caroline Weiss. First, I'm going to see if Ms. Weiss can fit me in today. Then I need to go to the house and get some clothes, my laptop, important documents. After that, I guess it depends on how the conversation with Michael goes. Want me to come with you? To the house, I mean? Kate offered. I considered it, then shook my head. I need to handle this myself. But maybe stay by your phone, just in case. Always, she promised. And Rebecca, remember that whatever he says, however he tries to explain or justify or minimize what he did, you know the truth. Trust your instincts. I nodded, grateful for her unwavering support. While Michael had been systematically isolating me from our old friends, always with plausible excuses about being too busy or them not being the right kind of connection for his new position, Kate had remained my constant, my reality check, my safe harbor. Caroline Weiss's office was able to see me at 10:30, which gave me time to shower, borrow some clothes from Kate, and mentally prepare for what promised to be a challenging day. As I waited for my Uber, my phone buzzed with a text from Tom Richards. I understand this is a difficult time, but my offer to speak privately stands. There are aspects of the situation you may not be aware of that could be relevant to your decisions going forward. Curious, what could Tom know that I didn't? And why would he risk reaching out to me directly, potentially undermining his own employee? I typed a careful response. I appreciate your concern. Perhaps we could meet tomorrow. Today is rather full. His reply came quickly. Tomorrow works. 11 a.m. at Le Petit Café on Michigan Avenue. It's discreet and away from Stratton's usual haunts. I confirmed the appointment, increasingly intrigued by what Tom might want to discuss. Whatever it was, it clearly wasn't something he wanted connected to the company or observed by colleagues. Caroline Weiss's office was in a sleek high-rise overlooking the Chicago River, its reception area decorated in soothing neutrals with abstract art on the walls. The woman herself, when she emerged to greet me, was a study in contained power. A perfectly tailored charcoal suit, silver hair cut in a precise bob, and shrewd eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of my appearance. Mrs. Taylor, she said, extending her hand. Please come in. I followed her to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and took the offered seat across from her desk. Your situation, she began without preamble, as you described it to my assistant, involves potential financial misconduct, possible infidelity, and significant assets. Is that correct? Yes, I confirmed. Though to be clear, I don't have concrete evidence of the infidelity yet, just strong circumstantial indications. She waved this away. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state. Infidelity may be relevant to the narrative, but it won't directly impact the financial settlement unless it involved the misuse of marital assets. She fixed me with that penetrating gaze, which, from what you've described about the Miami property, it very well might have. For the next 45 minutes, I laid out the situation in detail. The gradual changes in Michael's behavior, the financial manipulations, the secret property purchase, the planned trip with his assistant, and my confrontation at the restaurant. Caroline took notes on a legal pad, occasionally stopping me to ask for clarification or additional details. You mentioned you've been keeping separate accounts for some time, she noted. That was astute of you. Many clients don't have that foresight. I learned from a friend's experience, I explained. And my sister encouraged me to be prepared, just in case. Your sister gave you good advice. Now let's talk strategy. She set down her pen and folded her hands on her desk. Based on what you've told me, your husband has engaged in several actions that strengthen our position considerably, using joint funds to purchase property without your knowledge or consent, attempting to hide assets, the possible misuse of company resources to facilitate an inappropriate relationship. She tapped her legal pad thoughtfully. I presume you've documented all of this. I have copies of all our financial records for the past 5 years. Bank statements, investment, accounts, property records, and screenshots of suspicious text exchanges, though nothing explicitly incriminating. Good. The financial records are the most important. Have you transferred copies to a secure location your husband can't access? I nodded. Multiple copies. In fact, cloud storage under an account he doesn't know about, physical copies with my sister, and a flash drive in my personal safety deposit box. Caroline smiled for the first time. I wish all my clients were this prepared, Mrs. Taylor. It would make my job considerably easier. She pulled out a fresh legal pad and began outlining next steps, freezing certain assets to prevent further transfers, formally documenting the value of our property and possessions, preparing preliminary divorce filings that would be ready to submit when I gave the word. What about today? I asked. I'm meeting Michael at noon to collect some belongings. He wants to talk. Caroline's expression grew serious. Listen, but commit to nothing. Make no agreements, sign no documents, accept no transfers of property or valuables without consulting me first. If he becomes agitated or you feel unsafe at any point, leave immediately. Your physical safety is the priority. I don't think he would, I began, then stopped myself. The truth was, I didn't know what Michael might do now. The man I'd married wouldn't have emptied our accounts without warning or used our savings to buy a secret property. The man I was dealing with now was a stranger wearing my husband's face. Take precautions, Caroline advised. Have someone check in with you at a set time. Keep your phone charged and accessible. And remember that anything he says may be recorded or documented for later use. With that sobering thought, our meeting concluded. As I left Caroline's office, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Sadness at the practical dismantling of my marriage, anxiety about the confrontation to come, but also a growing sense of empowerment. I had expert guidance now. I had evidence. I had options. What I didn't have anymore was illusions. And perhaps that was the most valuable thing of all. The drive to our Lincoln Park townhouse felt surreal, as if I were navigating to a place I'd only visited in dreams rather than the home I'd lived in for 5 years. The neighborhood's tree-lined streets and elegant brownstones now seemed like a movie set, beautiful but artificial, designed to project an image rather than provide comfort. I parked my car along the curb rather than pulling into the garage. A small act of resistance, a signal that I wouldn't be staying long. Michael's Mercedes was already in the driveway, a gleaming testament to his priorities. The house facade, with its perfectly maintained window boxes and tasteful exterior lighting, revealed nothing of the chaos unfolding inside. For a moment, I sat motionless behind the wheel, gathering my strength for what was to come. Caroline, Weiss's advice echoed in my mind. Listen, but commit to nothing. Leave if you feel unsafe. Document everything. I'd texted Kate when I left her apartment, instructing her to call the police if she didn't hear from me by 1:30. An extreme precaution. Perhaps, but these were extreme circumstances. The man waiting inside was not the man I'd thought I married. He was someone capable of calculated financial manipulation, of secret property purchases, of emptying our joint accounts without warning. What else might he be capable of when cornered? With a deep breath, I stepped out of the car, straightened my borrowed blouse, and approached the front door. I used my key, though I half expected the locks to have been changed overnight, and entered what had once been my sanctuary. The foyer was immaculate as always, no sign of distress or urgency, just the familiar scent of the expensive candles Michael insisted on burning, the carefully arranged flowers on the console table, the strategically placed art pieces selected more for their investment potential than any emotional resonance. Rebecca. Michael appeared in the doorway to the living room, looking like he'd aged years overnight. His usual impeccable appearance was marred by rumpled clothes and dark circles under his eyes. He'd clearly slept poorly, if at all. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I wasn't sure you would." "I said I would." I remained standing, in the foyer, maintaining distance between us. "I need to get some things." He nodded too quickly. "Of course, whatever you need. But can we talk first, please?" I studied him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. The desperation in his expression was new. Michael Taylor, vice president at Stratton Financial, was not a man accustomed to pleading. He was a man used to issuing directives and having them followed, to making decisions and seeing them implemented without question. "All right," I conceded. "We can talk." He gestured toward the living room, but I shook my head. "The kitchen," I said. The living room was his domain, designed for impression rather than comfort, with its uncomfortable modernist furniture and intimidating art pieces. The kitchen had always felt more like mine, with the small touches I'd insisted on despite his objections. The herb garden in the window, the collection of cookbooks, the photographs on the refrigerator that he'd deemed cluttering. Michael hesitated, then nodded, leading the way through the dining room to the kitchen at the back of the house. I noticed he'd made coffee, the expensive single-origin beans he preferred, and set out 2 mugs. A peace offering, or perhaps just habit. "Would you like some?" he asked, gesturing to the coffee pot. "No, thank you. I've already had some. At Kate's." A flicker of something, annoyance, jealousy, crossed his face at the mention of my sister. Michael had never approved of Kate's influence in my life, though he'd been careful to frame his objections in terms of concern rather than control. "She's so negative about relationships," he'd often say. "I worry about how much time you spend with her." Or, "Don't you think her lifestyle is a bit unstable? All those strange art projects and impulsive decisions." Now I recognized those comments for what they were. Deliberate attempts to isolate me from one of the few people who saw through his facade. "How is Kate?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral as he poured himself coffee. "Fine, supportive, as she's always been." He winced slightly at the implication. "Rebecca, about last night." "About last night," I interrupted, "and the days leading up to it. The emptied accounts, the canceled cards, the Miami property." I met his gaze directly. "I need you to understand something, Michael. I didn't come here for apologies or excuses. I came for my things, and because I believe in giving you the courtesy of hearing what happens next directly from me." He set down his coffee mug, his knuckles white with tension. "And what exactly happens next, Rebecca?" "I've retained counsel," I said simply. "Caroline Weiss. Perhaps you've heard of her? She specializes in high-asset divorces, particularly ones involving financial misconduct." Michael paled visibly. "Divorce? Rebecca, you can't be serious. One disagreement about our finances and you're ready to throw away 7 years of marriage." "One disagreement?" I repeated incredulously. "Is that what you call emptying our joint accounts without warning? Purchasing property with our savings without my knowledge? Planning a trip with your secretary to that very property while financially stranding your wife?" "It wasn't like that," he insisted, running a hand through his usually immaculate hair. "The accounts? That was a mistake. I was moving funds for a temporary investment opportunity. I was going to tell you about it at dinner last night, explain the whole thing, but then you blindsided me with that secret account of yours, and everything spiraled." I raised an eyebrow. "A mistake that coincidentally happened right after I refused to consider quitting my job? Right before your trip with Amber? Right as I mentioned being up for a promotion that would make me the higher earner? The timing was unfortunate, I admit. He took a step toward me, then stopped when I instinctively backed away. But you have to believe me, Rebecca. I would never intentionally hurt you. I love you. Everything I've done has been for us. For our future. Including the Miami condo? I challenged. He closed his eyes briefly. That was complicated. I should have told you about it, yes, but it was meant to be an investment. A place we could use, maybe even retire to someday. In Amber's hometown, with a single bedroom, booked as a suite for your upcoming trip, against company policy. I shook my head. Please don't insult my intelligence, Michael. It only makes this worse. He set his mug down with more force than necessary, coffee sloshing over the rim onto the immaculate granite countertop. What do you want me to say, Rebecca? That I made a mistake? Fine, I made a mistake. Several of them. But everyone deserves a second chance. We can work through this. Can we? Because from where I'm standing, this isn't about mistakes. It's about who you've become. Who you've been all along, perhaps, though I was too blinded by love to see. I leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted by the weight of realization. The man I married wouldn't have tried to financially control me. He wouldn't have purchased property behind my back. He wouldn't have scheduled a romantic getaway with his secretary. It wasn't a romantic getaway, Michael protested, but his eyes slid away from mine, a tell I recognized from years of watching him negotiate. The Miami trip was business. Amber was just doing her job. Was she? Then why cancel the trip this morning? Why tell her to find another position, as you mentioned? In your texts? If everything was innocent and professional, why the sudden urgency to distance yourself from her? Michael's mouth opened, then closed. For once, he seemed at a loss for the smooth explanations and justifications that had always come so easily, to him. I pressed my advantage. Here's what I think happened. I think you saw an opportunity for advancement at Stratton and decided that having a wife with her own successful career didn't fit the image you wanted to project. I think you started resenting my independence, financial, professional, personal. I think you began looking for someone more compliant, more impressed by your position and status. Someone like Amber. That's not... Let me finish, I said quietly. I think you convinced yourself that I was the problem, that my ambition was somehow a criticism of yours, that my success diminished yours. And rather than addressing those feelings honestly, you started creating a separate life. One with secret properties and hidden funds, and a younger woman who looked up to you the way I used to, before I saw behind the mask. Michael's face contorted, with a mixture of anger and desperation. You make it sound so calculated, so cold. Is that really what you think of me? That I'm some kind of manipulative monster? I think you're someone who's gotten very good at justifying your actions even to yourself, I replied. I think you genuinely believe you're the wronged party here, that my obsession with my career and my failure to prioritize your needs somehow excuses what you've done. He started to protest, then stopped, perhaps hearing the truth in my words. Instead, he tried a different approach. What about all the good times? He asked, his voice softening. The trips we've taken, the holidays we've shared, the plans we've made? Are you really willing to throw all of that away? This was the Michael I remembered, the charming, persuasive man who could make anyone see things his way. The man I'd fallen in love with in graduate school, who'd seemed so supportive of my ambitions, so different from the other men I'd dated who'd felt threatened by my drive and intelligence. But now I could see the manipulation underneath the charm, the calculation behind the reminiscence. I'm not throwing anything away, Michael. You already did that when you emptied our accounts, when you purchased property without my knowledge. When you developed whatever relationship you have with Amber, I'm simply acknowledging what's already happened. His expression hardened. And if I refuse to accept that, if I fight this divorce with everything I have, then you'll be fighting a losing battle, I said calmly. I have documentation of the financial transfers. I have records of the property purchase. I have evidence of the inappropriate travel arrangements with your assistant. Do you really want all of that coming out in court? Do you want Tom and the board at Stratton to know exactly what you've been doing with company resources? Michael blanched. You wouldn't. I don't want to, I corrected him. I take no pleasure in the idea of damaging your career or reputation, but I will do what's necessary to protect myself and what's rightfully mine. He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Not as the supportive wife he'd expected me to be. Not as the obstacle to his ambitions I'd apparently become, but as a formidable opponent in my own right. What do you want? He asked. Finally, his voice resigned. A fair division of our assets. Full documentation of all financial accounts and holdings. A clean break with minimal drama. I hesitated, then added, and your word that you won't contest the divorce on grounds. That would drag this out unnecessarily. Michael considered this, his calculating mind clearly weighing options and outcomes. And in return? In return, I don't make public the details of your conduct, professional or personal. He ran a hand through his hair again, a gesture that had once endeared him to me, but now just emphasized how thoroughly I'd misjudged him. I need time to think. You have until the end of the week, I said. After that, Ms. Weiss files the divorce papers, and we proceed formally. I straightened from the counter. Now, if you'll excuse me, I came to collect some things. Without waiting for his response, I headed upstairs to the master bedroom. The space felt foreign now, like visiting a hotel room I'd once stayed in. Recognizable, but not mine. I pulled out a suitcase from the closet and began methodically packing clothes, toiletries, the few personal items that held genuine meaning for me. As I worked, I heard Michael moving around downstairs, occasionally taking phone calls in hushed tones, checking with his own attorney, no doubt, or perhaps trying to do damage control with Tom before their scheduled meeting. In the bathroom, I caught sight of myself in the mirror, the same face that had stared back at me yesterday morning, and yet somehow entirely different. The woman who'd applied makeup in this very spot 24 hours ago had been living in uncertainty and suspicion. The woman looking back now had clarity, painful as it was. I touched my wedding ring, twisting it thoughtfully. Then, with deliberate care, I removed it and placed it on the vanity. Another piece of the past left behind. When I returned downstairs with my suitcase, Michael was waiting in the foyer, his expression unreadable. You're really doing this, he said, eyeing the suitcase, the absence of my ring. I really am. He took a deep breath. I have my meeting with Tom in 20 minutes. I need to know what you've told him, what he knows. Of course. Even now, his primary concern was damage control. Professional reputation, saving face with his boss. I haven't told him anything beyond what came out at dinner, I replied truthfully, though he's asked to meet with me tomorrow. Michael's eyes narrowed. What for? I don't know. He texted this morning, said there were aspects of the situation I might not be aware of. I shouldered my handbag. I guess I'll find out tomorrow. Rebecca, wait! He reached for my arm but stopped short of actually touching me. Before you go, there's something you should know about Tom. About Stratton. I paused, curiosity getting the better of me. What about them? Michael glanced at his watch, clearly torn between time pressure and the desire to control the narrative. The Henderson deal, it's not what you think. There are irregularities, things that don't add up. He lowered his voice. I've been looking into it quietly. That's part of why I needed a separate property, somewhere off the books to store documentation. I stared at him incredulously. You expect me to believe that the Miami condo was some kind of, what? Safe house for corporate whistleblowing? Not exactly, but... He broke off, frustration evident in his expression. It's complicated, and I don't have time to explain it all now. Just be careful what you say to Tom. Don't trust him implicitly. With that cryptic warning, he grabbed his suit jacket from the coat rack and headed for the door. "I'll call you later," he said, pausing with his hand on the doorknob. "This isn't over, Rebecca. Not by a long shot." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the elegant foyer of what had once been our home, surrounded by the trappings of a life that now felt like an elaborate stage set, beautiful but hollow, designed for show rather than substance. I took one last look around, mentally saying goodbye to the woman who had lived here, who had believed in the fiction of her marriage, who had slowly compromised pieces of herself to fit someone else's vision. Then I picked up my suitcase and walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. The cafe where I was meeting Tom Richards the next day was indeed discreet. A small French bistro tucked away on a side street off Michigan Avenue, far from the financial district and the usual power lunch spots frequented by Stratton executives. I arrived early, selecting a table in the corner that afforded a view of both the entrance and the street outside. The events of the past 24 hours had left me cautious, hyper-aware. Michael's cryptic warning about Tom and the Henderson deal lingered in my mind, though I wasn't sure how much credence to give it. Was it a genuine concern for my welfare? Or just another manipulation tactic to keep me off balance? I'd spent the night at Kate's again, sorting through the practical implications of my new reality. Bank accounts to open, mail to redirect, health insurance to secure. The mundane logistics of dismantling a shared life, each task a small, painful acknowledgement of what had been lost. Kate had listened patiently, offering advice where she could and silent support where she couldn't. "You know," she'd said as we shared a bottle of wine, "I always thought Michael was too perfect, too polished, like he was playing a role instead of being a person." Those words had stayed with me, crystallizing something I'd sensed but never articulated. Michael had always been performing, for his colleagues, for our social circle, even for me. The perfect, ambitious executive, the perfect, attentive husband, the perfect everything, except authentic. Tom arrived precisely at 11, dressed more casually than I'd ever seen him in khakis and a button-down shirt rather than his usual tailored suit. Without the trappings of his corporate persona, he looked older, more approachable. "Rebecca," he greeted me, extending his hand. "Thank you for meeting me." I shook his hand, noting the firm grip, the direct eye contact. "Your message intrigued." "Me?" I replied. "Though I confess I'm not entirely sure why the CEO of Stratton Financial wants to have coffee with the wife of one of his executives, particularly under the current circumstances." Tom smiled slightly as he took the seat across from me. "Former CEO, actually, as of this morning." I blinked in surprise. "Excuse me?" I tendered my resignation to the board at 7 a.m. He explained, his tone remarkably calm for someone who had just walked away from one of the most powerful positions in Chicago finance. It was overdue. Before I could formulate a response, a waiter approached for our orders. Tom requested an espresso, while I opted for a cappuccino. Once the waiter had departed, I leaned forward. "I don't understand. What does your resignation have to do with me? With the situation with Michael?" Tom studied me for a moment, as if assessing how much to share. "How much do you know about the Henderson portfolio?" he asked finally. The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. "Only what I overheard at dinner. It's a major account, potentially worth millions to Stratton. Michael's been working on it for months. The Miami trip was supposed to finalize the details." Tom nodded slowly. "That's the official story, yes. The one we've been telling the board, the investors, the financial press." He paused as the waiter returned with our coffee. Once we were alone again, he continued, his voice lowered. The reality is somewhat different. Different how? I asked, a sense of unease growing in my stomach. The Henderson Group doesn't exist, Tom said bluntly. At least not in the way we've been representing it. The portfolio Michael's been developing is essentially a shell. Impressive projections, glossy presentations, but no actual substance. I stared at him, trying to process this revelation. I don't understand. Are you saying Michael has been fabricating an entire client portfolio? Why would he do that? Not just Michael, Tom corrected. The deception goes higher. Much higher. He took a sip of his espresso, his expression grim. For the past 2 years, Stratton Financial has been engaged in what amounts to an elaborate Ponzi scheme, using new investor funds to cover losses and pay returns to existing clients, creating fictitious portfolios to justify continued investment, manipulating financial statements to hide the growing discrepancies. My mind raced, trying to connect this bombshell to my personal situation. And Michael? What's his role in all this? That's where things get complicated, Tom replied. Your husband joined Stratton after the scheme was already underway. I believe he was initially unaware of what was happening. But as he rose through the ranks, as he gained access to more sensitive information, he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. He figured it out. I finished for him. And then what? Became complicit? Reported it? Tried to stop it? Tom's expression was unreadable. That's what I'm still trying to determine. Michael's behavior has been erratic these past few months. The Miami trip, the property purchase, the unusual account transfers. At first, I thought he might be preparing to expose the fraud. Then I wondered if he was positioning himself to take advantage of it. Now, after what happened at dinner, I'm not sure what to think. I took a slow sip of my cappuccino, buying time to process this information. If what Tom was saying was true, and I had no reason yet to doubt him, it cast Michael's recent actions in an entirely new light. The secret property could indeed have been a place to store sensitive documents as he'd claimed. The account transfers might have been an attempt to protect our assets from the fallout of a financial scandal. Or they might have been preparations for escape, for a new life built on stolen funds and fabricated identities. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. If Stratton is engaged in fraud at this level, why confide in me? Why resign instead of reporting it to the authorities? Tom smiled grimly. Who says I haven't reported it? My resignation letter included a full disclosure of the scheme, copies of which were simultaneously delivered to the SEC, the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, and the State Attorney General's office. He leaned forward. As for why I'm telling you, partly because you deserve to know what you're potentially caught up in, and partly because I need your help. My help? I repeated incredulously. I'm a marketing director at a completely different company. What could I possibly do to help with a financial fraud investigation? You're also the person closest to Michael Taylor, Tom pointed out. You have insight into his actions, his motivations, his recent behavior that no one else has, and you clearly have access to financial records and communications that could be crucial to understanding his role in all this. I sat back, stunned by the implications. You want me to... What? Spy on my husband? Report his activities to... You? Turn over private communications and records? Not to me, Tom clarified. To the proper authorities. I've already given them your name as someone who might have relevant information. They'll be contacting you probably within the next day or two. The weight of this new reality settled over me like a lead blanket. Not only was my marriage ending in betrayal and recrimination, but now I was potentially entangled in a major financial fraud investigation. The foundations of my life weren't just cracking, they were completely disintegrating. What happens next? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. For Stratton, a thorough investigation. Probable criminal charges for those most deeply involved. Potential bankruptcy proceedings. Tom's expression softened slightly. For you? That depends partly on what the investigation reveals about Michael's role and partly on your own choices. Moving forward. My choices, I repeated thoughtfully. Tom nodded. You're at a crossroads, Rebecca. You can choose to distance yourself entirely from this situation, file for divorce, cooperate minimally with investigators, rebuild your life separately from all of this. Or you can choose to be more actively involved in uncovering the truth, whatever that might be. Even if the truth implicates Michael in serious financial crimes? I challenged. Especially then, Tom replied without hesitation. Because if he is involved, if he has crossed legal and ethical lines, you need to protect yourself. And if he isn't, if he's been trying to gather evidence as he might claim, then your cooperation could help establish that. I stirred my cappuccino absently, watching the foam swirl and dissolve. The Michael I thought I knew would never participate in financial fraud, but the Michael I thought I knew wouldn't empty our joint accounts without warning or purchase property behind my back either. I need time to think, I said finally. This is a lot to process. Tom nodded understandingly. Of course, but not too much time. Once the investigation becomes public, which could happen as early as tomorrow, things will move quickly. Accounts will be frozen, documents will be seized, communications will be monitored. Are you saying I should warn Michael? I asked, surprised by the suggestion. I'm saying you should consider carefully what actions align with your own moral compass, Tom replied diplomatically. My role in this is done. I've made my disclosures, tendered my resignation. What happens next is beyond my control. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a business card, sliding it across the table to me. This is the contact information for Special Agent Marissa Chen at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. She's leading the investigation. When you're ready to talk, if you choose to, she's the person to call. I took the card, turning it over in my fingers. Such a small, ordinary object to represent such a momentous decision. I should go, Tom said, rising from the table. I've taken up enough of your time, and I have my own difficult conversations ahead, with my wife, my attorneys, my financial advisors. He smiled wryly. It seems we're both facing the dismantling of lives we thought were solid. I stood extending my hand. Thank you for the warning, whatever your motives. He clasped my hand briefly. My motives are simpler than you might think, Rebecca. I've spent 2 years watching this deception grow, telling myself I was gathering evidence, that I would stop it before anyone got hurt. But people have already been hurt. Investors who trusted us with their savings. Employees who believed in the company's integrity. And yes, spouses and families who had no idea what they were connected to. His expression turned regretful. Sometimes the only way to make amends is to tear everything down and start over. Remember that. With those cryptic words, he turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving me alone with my coffee, the FBI agent's card, and a set of questions that had suddenly grown exponentially more complex than the simple matter of a failing marriage. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Michael. For a moment, I stared at his name on the screen, wondering if he already knew about Tom's resignation, about the impending investigation, wondering what version of events he would offer, what justifications or explanations he had prepared. I declined the call, slipping the phone back into my purse alongside Agent Chen's card. There would be time for conversations with Michael later. Right now, I needed to think, to plan, to decide what kind of person I wanted to be in the face of this unfolding catastrophe. Because one thing was certain, the life I had known was over. What replaced it would depend on choices I made in the coming hours and days, choices that would reveal not just what kind of wife I had been, but what kind of woman I truly was. The FBI's Chicago field office was housed in a nondescript building that somehow managed to be both imposing and forgettable, much like the agents themselves. I sat in a sterile interview room, a cup of mediocre coffee cooling untouched before me as Special Agent Marissa Chen reviewed her notes. 3 days had passed since my meeting with Tom Richards. 3 days of frantic phone calls from Michael, stern consultations with Caroline Weiss, and long, soul-searching conversations with Kate. 3 days of watching my carefully constructed life disintegrate while trying to determine what, if anything, remained worth salvaging. "Mrs. Taylor," Agent Chen began, her tone professional but not unkind. "Thank you for coming in voluntarily. As I explained on the phone, we're investigating allegations of securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering at Stratton Financial. Your position as the spouse of a senior executive there makes you a person of interest in our investigation." I nodded, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "I understand. And as I told you, I'm willing to cooperate fully. I have nothing to hide." That wasn't entirely true. I had plenty to hide. My shame at not recognizing the signs earlier, my lingering doubts about Michael's true character and motivations, my fear that I might somehow be implicated in whatever he had done. But none of those were criminal matters. Just the private wreckage of a failed marriage. "Let's start with what you know about the Henderson portfolio," Agent Chen suggested, activating a small digital recorder on the table between us. I recounted what Tom had told me, that the portfolio was essentially fictional, part of a larger Ponzi scheme operating within Stratton Financial. I explained that until our meeting, I'd known nothing about it beyond what I'd overheard at business dinners. "And your husband never discussed the details of this account with you? Never mentioned any concerns or irregularities?" I hesitated, remembering Michael's cryptic warning about Tom and the Henderson deal. "Not directly. No. Though the day I went to collect my things from our house, he did make a strange comment. He said there were irregularities with the Henderson deal, that things didn't add up. He implied that was why he'd purchased the Miami property, as some kind of off-the-books location to store documentation." Agent Chen made a note. "Did you believe him?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," I admitted. "A week ago, I would have said my husband was many things, ambitious, controlling, status-conscious, but not a criminal. Now..." I trailed off, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. "Let's talk about the financial transactions," Agent Chen redirected. "You mentioned significant transfers from your joint accounts prior to the dinner at Emerson's. Can you elaborate on that?" For the next 2 hours, I walked Agent Chen through a detailed timeline of our finances, the gradual consolidation of accounts under Michael's control, the increasing restrictions on my access, the final emptying of our joint funds before the disastrous dinner with Tom and Jessica. I provided the documentation Caroline had helped me compile, watching as the agent's expression grew increasingly grave. "These patterns are consistent with what we typically see in preparation for flight," she observed, reviewing the transfer records. "Large sums move to accounts that are difficult to trace, liquidation of assets, establishment of alternate identities, or residences." "Flight?" I repeated, the implications sinking in. "You think Michael was planning to disappear?" "It's one possibility we're investigating," she confirmed. "The timing is certainly suggestive. Funds transferred immediately before a trip to Miami, a property purchased in a location with easy access to international waters, reservations made, under circumstances that violated company policy." My mind reeled. Had Michael actually been planning to abandon me? To flee the country with Amber and our joint savings, leaving me to face the collapse of Stratton Financial alone? "There's something else you should know," I said after a moment. When I confronted Michael at the restaurant, I mentioned text, messages between him and Amber. But the truth is, I never actually saw those messages. I was bluffing. I felt my cheeks warm with embarrassment. I suspected something was happening, but I didn't have proof. Agent Chen raised an eyebrow. A risky strategy. It worked, I pointed out. His reaction confirmed what I suspected. Indeed. She made another note. Mrs. Taylor, I need to ask you a difficult question now. Based on everything you've told me, the financial manipulations, the secret property, the planned trip with his assistant, what do you believe your husband's involvement in the Stratton fraud might be? I took a deep breath, considering my words carefully. Whatever I said could have serious consequences for Michael, for the investigation, for my own future. I don't know, I said finally. The Michael I thought I knew wouldn't participate in something like this, but clearly, I didn't know him as well as I believed I did. I met the agent's gaze directly. What I do know is that he's been acting erratically for months, secretive, controlling, increasingly paranoid about my career and financial independence. Those could be signs of guilt or stress, or simply the actions of a man who no longer wanted to be married but didn't know how to exit gracefully. Agent Chen nodded thoughtfully. One last question for now. Have you spoken with your husband since learning about the investigation? He's called and texted repeatedly, I admitted. I haven't responded. Caroline, my attorney, advised against it until we understand the full legal implications. That was wise, Agent Chen confirmed. If you do speak with him, we would be very interested in learning what he has to say about the situation. But I must caution you against any actions that could be construed as tipping him off or interfering with our investigation. The implication was clear. I could help the FBI, build their case against my husband, or I could become a subject of investigation myself. I understand, I said quietly. As Agent Chen escorted me out of the interview room, she handed me her card. Call me directly if you think of anything else, or if your husband makes contact in a way that seems significant to our investigation. I tucked the card away, wondering what significant might mean in this context. Was there anything Michael could say or do at this point that wouldn't be relevant to the unfolding catastrophe? Outside, the Chicago spring afternoon was unexpectedly beautiful, the sunlight harsh and clarifying after the muted lighting of the FBI offices. I stood on the sidewalk, momentarily disoriented by the contrast between the ordinary world continuing around me and the extraordinary circumstances of my life. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Kate. I had updated her briefly before entering the FBI building, but promised more details afterward. How did it go? She asked when I answered. About as well as could be expected, I replied, starting toward the parking garage where I'd left my car. They're definitely building a case. They wanted to know everything about our finances, the Miami property, Michael's relationship with Amber. And what did you tell them? The truth, I said simply. Or at least as much of the truth as I know, which feels increasingly limited. Kate was silent for a moment. Have you checked the news in the last hour? No, I was in the interview. Why? Stratton Financial's stock has been suspended from trading. The SEC just announced a formal investigation into securities fraud. It's all over the financial channels. I stopped walking, absorbing this development. So it's public now. Very public, Kate confirmed. They're saying it could be the biggest financial scandal in Chicago since the Haverford collapse in 2010. The Haverford collapse, a massive investment fraud that had ruined hundreds of families and resulted in multiple suicides, criminal convictions, and decades of legal battles. The fact that Stratton was being mentioned in the same breath was telling. Rebecca, Kate's voice grew serious. There's something else. Michael has been trying to reach you through me. He showed up at my building about an hour ago, said it was urgent that he speak with you before you talk to the authorities. A chill ran through me despite the warm afternoon. What did you tell him? That you were unavailable and that he should contact your attorney. He didn't take it well. Said some things about how you'd regret shutting him out, how there were sides to this story I couldn't possibly understand. The implied threat in those words was unmistakable. Are you okay? Did he threaten you directly? I'm fine, Kate assured me. He was agitated but not violent. Still, I called the building security after he left, just to be on the safe side. Good. Stay alert, okay? I'll head over to your place now. I quickened my pace toward the parking garage, suddenly anxious to be somewhere safe, to process everything I'd learned with the one person I truly trusted. Actually, Kate hesitated. Maybe we should meet somewhere else, just in case he comes back. She was right, of course. If Michael was desperate enough to show up uninvited at Kate's apartment, he might well return, especially once he learned I'd been speaking with the FBI. The lakefront cafe near the art museum, I suggested. It's public, busy, and not somewhere Michael would think to look for us. We agreed to meet in 30 minutes. As I reached my car, I noticed a folded piece of paper tucked under the windshield. Wiper. My heart rate accelerated as I glanced around the parking garage, suddenly aware of how isolated I was among the concrete pillars and shadowed corners. With careful movements, I retrieved the paper, unfolding it to reveal a handwritten note. Rebecca. By now you've spoken with the FBI. Whatever they've told you, whatever you think you know, it's not the complete picture. I've been working to expose the fraud at Stratton for months, gathering evidence, building a case. I couldn't tell you. It wasn't safe. For either of us. The Miami property, the account transfers, all of it was to protect us, to create a secure position before everything fell apart. Amber has been helping me because she found the initial discrepancies in the Henderson files. She's been acting as my internal source. I know how this looks. I know I've given you reason to doubt me, but please, before you decide what to believe, meet me. Just once. Let me show you what I've found. The Boathouse, Lincoln Park, 7 p.m. tonight. Come alone. Trust no one else with this information. Especially, not Tom Richards. I love you. Despite everything, that has never changed. Might. I stared at the note, my mind spinning with competing interpretations. Could Michael be telling the truth? Was he actually some kind of corporate whistleblower, working secretly to expose the fraud at Stratton? That would explain the property purchase, the financial movements, even the closeness with Amber. Or was this just another manipulation, a desperate attempt to gain my sympathy and potentially my silence as the investigation closed in? The Michael I'd married, brilliant, ambitious, sometimes ruthless but fundamentally principled, might well have taken on the role of internal whistleblower. But the Michael who'd emptied our accounts without warning, who'd tried to financially control me, who'd booked a romantic getaway with his assistant against company policy, that Michael was capable of deception on a scale I was only beginning to comprehend. I carefully folded the note and slipped it into my purse, my decision already forming. Whatever the truth was, I couldn't face it alone. Not anymore. The lakefront cafe was crowded with tourists and locals enjoying the spring weather, the outdoor, tables offering a perfect view of Lake Michigan's vast blue expanse. I spotted Kate at a corner table, her artist's eye having selected the position with the best sight lines and fewest approach vectors, a habit she'd developed during a brief relationship with a private security consultant years ago. You look like you've seen a ghost, she observed as I sat down across from her. What happened? Wordlessly, I handed her Michael's note, watching her expression shift from concern to skepticism as she read. Well, this is certainly convenient, she said finally, returning the paper. He just happens to have been a secret whistleblower all along, and everything that looked like betrayal was actually protection. I know how it sounds, I acknowledged, but what if it's true? What if he has been gathering evidence? That would explain a lot of his behavior over the past few months. Kate's expression softened. Becca, I know you want to believe the best of him. That's who you are, someone who sees the potential in people, who gives second chances. It's One of your most beautiful qualities. She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. But it's also made you vulnerable to someone who knows exactly how to exploit that generosity. I sighed, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. So you think the note is just another manipulation? I think, Kate said carefully, that if Michael really has evidence of financial crimes at Stratton, he should be sharing it with the FBI, not asking his estranged wife to meet him alone at a secluded location after dark. Put that way, the red flags were impossible to ignore. Still, something in me resisted the simple explanation that Michael was entirely villain, that our 7 years together had been nothing but an elaborate deception. I need to know, Kate, one way or the other. I need to see for myself what he has to say, what evidence he claims to have. Kate's eyes widened. You're not seriously considering meeting him? Not alone, I clarified, and not without precautions. But yes, I'm considering it. Rebecca, this is crazy. The man emptied your accounts, bought a secret property, planned a trip with his secretary, and is now potentially implicated in a massive financial fraud. And you want to meet him in an isolated location because of a melodramatic note left on your windshield? When she put it that way, it did sound absurd. And yet, I spent 7 years with him, Kate. 7 years building a life, making plans, loving him. I can't just write that off without at least hearing what he has to say. Kate studied me for a long moment, then sighed in resignation. You're going to do this no matter what I say, aren't you? I think I have to. Then I'm coming with you, she declared, holding up a hand to forestall my protest. Not to the meeting itself. I'll stay back, out of sight. But close enough to intervene if things go wrong. That's not necessary. It absolutely is, Kate insisted. And it's non-negotiable. Either I come along as backup, or I call Agent Chen right now and tell her about Michael's note. I recognized the determination in my sister's expression. There would be no moving her on this point. Fine, I conceded. But you stay well back. This conversation needs to be between Michael and me. Agreed, but I'm bringing pepper spray. And possibly a taser. Despite everything, I laughed. Where would you even get a taser? I dated a security consultant, remember? I have resources. Kate's expression turned serious again. Promise me you'll be careful, Becca. Not just physically, but emotionally. Whatever Michael says tonight, remember that his actions over the past months speak louder than any explanation he might offer. Now, I nodded, though in truth, I wasn't sure how objective I could be. Despite everything that had happened, despite the betrayal and manipulation, some part of me still wanted to believe in the man I'd married. Wanted to believe that there was an explanation that could reconcile the Michael I thought I knew with the Michael who had emptied our accounts and purchased a secret property. The Lincoln Park boathouse was picturesque but isolated, especially as evening approached and the casual park visitors began heading home. Kate dropped me at the entrance to the path leading to the structure, then continued driving to position herself unobtrusively in a nearby parking area. Close enough to respond if needed, but far enough away to give me the privacy this conversation required. The waning sunlight cast long shadows across the park as I walked the winding path to the boathouse. In the distance, the Chicago skyline glittered against the darkening sky, a reminder of the city's beauty and its capacity for hiding ugliness behind gleaming facades. Much like my marriage, I reflected. Beautiful on the surface, admired by others, but concealing fundamental flaws that had finally, inevitably, led to collapse. The boathouse itself was a charming structure, a throwback to an earlier era with its wooden architecture and expansive views of the lagoon. During the day, it would be bustling with families renting paddle boats and canoes. Now, in the gathering dusk, it was eerily quiet, the water still and reflective in the fading light. I spotted Michael immediately, a solitary figure standing at the railing overlooking the water. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his posture, the uncharacteristic dishevelment of his appearance. The past few days had clearly taken their toll. He turned as I approached, and the naked relief on his face was startling. "You came," he said simply. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted, stopping several feet away from him, maintaining a careful distance. "Give me one good reason why I should listen to anything you have to say." Michael reached for the briefcase at his feet, a battered leather one I'd never seen before, not the sleek designer attaché he typically carried to work. "Because I can prove everything I told you in that note," he said, opening the case and extracting a thick file. "This is what I've been gathering for the past 5 months. Evidence of the fraud at Stratton, documentation of Tom Richards' direct involvement, proof that what's happening isn't just isolated accounting irregularities, but a systematic, deliberate Ponzi scheme reaching to the highest levels of the company. I made no move to take the file. And your solution was to empty our joint accounts without telling me? To purchase property in Miami without my knowledge? To plan a trip with your secretary that violated company policy?" "I know how it looks," Michael acknowledged, his expression pained. "But I couldn't tell you what was happening, Rebecca. Not until I had enough evidence to protect us both." "From what, exactly?" "From this." He gestured vaguely around us, as if encompassing the entire unfolding scandal. "From the fallout when it all came crashing down. From the legal jeopardy anyone associated with Stratton is now facing." "So emptying our accounts was, what, a protective measure?" I challenged. "Yes, exactly." He seemed relieved that I understood. "I needed to move our assets somewhere. They couldn't be frozen when the investigation became public, somewhere separate from Stratton's reach." "And the Miami property?" "A safe location to store the evidence, like I told you. Somewhere off the books, not connected to our regular lives. Amber helped me find it. Her cousin works in real estate there." I folded my arms, maintaining my skeptical stance despite the growing seed of doubt. "And I suppose booking a single hotel suite for the two of you was also part of this elaborate whistleblowing operation?" Michael at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. "That was a miscalculation. Amber suggested a suite would give us more space to organize the documentation we were gathering. It made sense logistically, but I should have recognized how it would appear." "Yes, you should have," I agreed coldly. "Just like you should have recognized how emptying our accounts without warning would appear, or how purchasing property without telling your wife would appear." "I made mistakes," Michael conceded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I was so focused on building the case, on protecting our future, that I lost sight of how my actions would affect you in the present. I'm sorry for that. Genuinely sorry." His apology sounded sincere, but then Michael had always been convincing. His entire career had been built on his ability to persuade, to present compelling narratives that others wanted to believe. Just as I had wanted to believe in our marriage, in his support of my career, in his fundamental decency. How much of that had been real, and how much had been performance? "Show me," I said finally. "Show me this evidence you've been gathering." Michael handed me the file, watching anxiously as I opened it to reveal page after page of financial statements, internal emails, meeting notes, and transaction records. I scanned them quickly, my marketing background giving me enough financial literacy to recognize the broad outlines if not the specific details. "This goes back years," I observed, noting dates from well before Michael joined the company. "How did you get access to these historical records?" "Amber," Michael explained. "She's been with Stratton since she was an intern. She had access to the archives as part of her administrative duties." I looked up sharply. "So you've been working with her all this time?" "The late nights at the office, the weekend meetings, those were real?" "Yes, but not in the way you suspected." Michael stepped closer, his expression earnest. Rebecca, I know how this has looked to you. I know I've given you reason to doubt me. But everything I've done has been to protect us, to ensure we had a future after Stratton inevitably collapsed. I wanted to believe him. God help me. Standing there in the gathering darkness with the evidence of financial malfeasance in my hands and the naked pleading in his eyes, I wanted to believe that my husband was the whistleblower, not the villain. But something still didn't add up. If this is all true, I said slowly, why not go to the authorities months ago? Why continue participating in the fraud while secretly gathering evidence? Why not just leave Stratton entirely? Because I needed enough proof to ensure Tom and the others couldn't wriggle out of it, Michael replied. I needed ironclad documentation that reached beyond plausible deniability. And I needed to secure our financial position first, so we wouldn't be dragged down with the company. It made a certain kind of sense, the kind that aligned with Michael's methodical, strategic mind. He had always been someone who planned 10 moves ahead, who considered all angles before acting. But there was still one piece missing from this narrative. And why did Tom resign and report the fraud himself? If he's as deeply implicated as these documents suggest, why would he be the one to expose it? Michael's expression darkened. Because he realized I was building a case. He decided to get ahead of it, to position himself as the remorseful whistleblower rather than the architect of the fraud. Classic damage control. And you're meeting with him after the dinner at Emerson's? What happened there? He offered me a deal, Michael said grimly. Said if I turned over all the evidence I'd gathered and kept quiet about his central role in the scheme, he'd ensure I was protected when the investigation began. Claimed he could make it look like I was cooperating from the beginning. And you refused? Of course I refused. I wasn't going to let him manipulate the narrative, not after what I'd discovered. Michael's face was flushed with genuine anger now. That's when I knew I had to act quickly. He was going to try to frame me, to make me the scapegoat while he played the repentant executive who discovered the fraud. It was a compelling story. All the pieces fit, arranged in a pattern that explained Michael's secretive behavior, the Miami property, even the closeness with Amber. If I accepted this version of events, my husband wasn't the villain, but the hero. Flawed, yes, making tactical errors in his personal life, but fundamentally acting from a place of principle and protection. But as Kate had warned, I'd been down this road before, wanting to believe the best of Michael, accepting his explanations and justifications, overlooking the red flags because I loved the man I thought he was. I want to believe you, I admitted. Finally. But I need more than just your word. I need verification from someone who isn't you. Michael nodded, as if he'd been expecting this. Amber can confirm everything. She's been working with me from the beginning. She'll tell you exactly how we discovered the fraud, how we've been documenting it, what Tom's role has been in all of it. Amber, I repeated flatly, your secretary, who you were planning to take to Miami, who has every reason to support whatever story you're telling. That's your independent verification? His face fell. Who else would there be, Rebecca? We couldn't trust anyone at Stratton. We couldn't go to the authorities until we had enough evidence. It was just the two of us, working to expose this before it destroyed everything. I closed the file, handing it back to him. If what you're saying is true, you need to take this to the FBI. Now, tonight. They're already investigating, and this would strengthen their case considerably. I will, Michael promised. First thing tomorrow morning. But tonight... He stepped closer, his expression softening. Tonight I needed to see you first, to explain, to try to repair some of the damage I've caused. The sincerity in his voice was compelling, the familiar warmth in his eyes a powerful reminder of what we'd once shared. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine that he was telling the truth, that we could somehow find our way back from this precipice. But then I remembered the cold calculation in his expression when my card was declined at Emerson's. The months of subtle undermining of my career. The gradual isolation from friends and family who might have provided perspective. The controlling behaviors that had nothing to do with any fraud investigation and everything to do with who Michael fundamentally was. "I believe that you've gathered evidence of fraud at Stratton," I said finally. "I believe you may even have been planning to expose it. But I don't believe that's the whole story, or that your motives were as pure as you're claiming." Michael's expression hardened slightly. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that whatever the truth is about the Stratton fraud, the truth about our marriage is clearer to me now than it's ever been. You've been controlling and manipulative. You've undermined my career and my independence. You've isolated me from people who cared about me. Those aren't the actions of someone trying to protect me. They're the actions of someone trying to own me." "That's not fair," Michael protested. "You're taking isolated incidents and creating a pattern that doesn't exist." "No," I corrected him gently. "I'm finally seeing the pattern that was there all along." I took a step back, creating more distance between us. "Take your evidence to the FBI, Michael. Cooperate with their investigation. Do the right thing professionally, even if you couldn't do it personally. Rebecca, please." His voice cracked with genuine emotion. "Don't throw away what we had. We can start over, rebuild on honesty this time. I'll be the man you thought I was, the man I want to be." For a heartbeat, I wavered. The pull of 7 shared years, of a love that had once seemed transformative, was powerful. But stronger still was my newfound clarity, my understanding of what I deserved in a partnership. "Goodbye, Michael," I said quietly. "I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope you become the man you claim to want to be, but I won't be there to see it." I turned and walked away, my steps steady on the path leading back to where Kate waited. Behind me, I heard Michael call my name once more, his voice fading. Into the gathering darkness like an echo from a past I was finally, irrevocably leaving behind. 6 months later, I stood at the railing of a different waterfront, the Chicago River rather than the Lincoln Park Lagoon, watching the autumn sunlight dance across the surface. The city around me was transformed by the seasonal change. Trees, ablaze with color, the air crisp with possibility. My life, too, had undergone a transformation. The divorce was finalized, the property divided, the shared accounts untangled. I'd moved to a smaller apartment in Wicker Park, close to Kate, but distinctly my own space, filled with books and art and photographs I'd once been told were cluttering. The Stratton financial scandal had dominated headlines for weeks before, fading into the background of newer crises. Michael had indeed taken his evidence to the FBI, corroborating much of what Tom Richards had already provided. The investigation was ongoing, with indictments expected against several senior executives, though not, significantly, against Michael himself. Whether that was because he truly had been gathering evidence with the intention of exposing the fraud, or because he'd made a deal to save himself at others' expense, I would likely never know with certainty. The truth, as with so many aspects of our marriage, remained elusive, colored by perspective and self-interest. What I did know was that the woman who had sat frozen in Emerson's as her card was declined. The woman who had allowed herself to be gradually isolated, controlled, and diminished was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, clearer, more certain of her boundaries and her worth. I had accepted the executive creative director position at Horizon Media, leading a team that had just won a major industry award for our latest campaign. I was dating occasionally, cautiously, establishing connections based on mutual respect rather than dependency or control. I was rebuilding relationships with friends who had drifted away during the later years of my marriage, rediscovering parts of myself that had been suppressed or forgotten. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate, reminding me about dinner with her new boyfriend. An architect she'd met at a gallery opening. Someone creative and kind who seemed to genuinely value her unique perspective on the world. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of a familiar figure across the river, Michael, walking with purpose toward the financial district, briefcase in hand. He looked much as he always had, successful, attractive, commanding, though perhaps with new lines around his eyes, a slight hesitancy in his stride that hadn't been there before. For a moment, our eyes met across the distance. A flicker of recognition, a ghost of what we'd once shared, passed between us. Then he nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than connection, and continued on his way. I did the same, walking toward my future with steps that felt increasingly sure, increasingly my own. The woman whose card had been declined in a restaurant 6 months ago had lost a husband, a home, a version of herself she'd carefully constructed over 7 years of marriage, but she had found something far more valuable in the aftermath. Her power, her voice, her unwavering certainty that she deserved more than controlled access to her own life. That woman, that stronger, clearer version of myself, was the one I was finally learning to trust, and no one could decline that. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.